Some people move through the world carrying thoughts they will never speak aloud, not because those thoughts are dark or dangerous, but because they have learned, quietly and often painfully, that not every mind around them is ready to receive what they are truly thinking. And if you have ever sat in a room full of people and still felt profoundly alone inside your own mind, this is for you. Today we are not talking about IQ scores or academic achievement. We are going somewhere far more personal than that. We are talking about the inner emotional landscape of highly intelligent people, the silent observations, the unspoken realizations, the thoughts that get swallowed before they ever reach the surface. Because here is what psychology has begun to show us. Intelligence is not just a cognitive experience. At its deepest levels, it is an emotional one, and that changes everything. I already know how this will hurt, and I still can't stop caring. There is something that researchers in emotional intelligence and depth psychology have observed quietly for years. Highly intelligent people often possess what psychologists call affective forecasting sensitivity, an almost involuntary ability to anticipate the emotional outcome of a situation before it fully unfolds. They feel the ending of something before it even begins. And here is the thought they almost never speak aloud. I already know how this is going to hurt me, and I still cannot stop myself from caring deeply anyway. That is not weakness. That is one of the most quietly courageous things a human being can do, to see the risk clearly and choose to love, trust, and invest anyway. But because that level of emotional foresight is difficult to explain without sounding either dramatic or self-pitying, most highly intelligent people simply carry it alone. Psychologist and researcher Kazimierz Dabrowski, who spent his life studying emotionally intense individuals, found that people with exceptional cognitive depth also tend to experience what he called psychic overexcitability, a heightened responsiveness to emotional experience that goes far beyond what most people around them feel. They are not overreacting. Their nervous system is genuinely registering more, and because the world rarely validates that, they learn to minimize it publicly while carrying its full weight privately. So they sit across from someone they love, already sensing the distance growing before a single difficult word is spoken. They walk into a new opportunity, already quietly grieving its possible loss. They invest fully, knowing the risk, because their depth of feeling simply does not allow them to do anything halfway. And that thought, the one that says, I see exactly where this is going, and I am choosing to stay open anyway, almost never gets said out loud. I am not too much. The world just never made enough room for me. Pause here for a moment and consider something honest. Have you ever been told, directly or indirectly, that you feel too deeply, think too seriously, or care too intensely? That your responses are disproportionate, your questions too heavy, your needs too complex? If that experience is familiar, you are not alone, and you are not broken. Research in sensory processing sensitivity, pioneered over decades of careful study, tells us that roughly 15 to 20% of the population carries a nervous system that is genuinely wired for deeper processing. These individuals do not simply observe the world, they absorb it. Every conversation carries layered meaning. Every relationship holds enormous emotional weight. Every environment registers at a frequency most people simply do not access. And here's the thought that highly intelligent, deeply feeling people almost never say aloud. I am not too much. The world just never built enough space to hold someone like me comfortably. That thought feels too vulnerable to speak. It risks sounding arrogant on one side and self-pitying on the other. So instead, they quietly reshape themselves. They make themselves smaller in conversations. They edit their enthusiasm. They swallow their observations. They learn to perform a version of themselves that the room can handle, while their actual inner world continues running at full depth just beneath the surface. Carl Jung wrote that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. For highly intelligent and deeply sensitive individuals, that terror is not abstract. It is daily. Because accepting yourself completely means accepting that your depth is not a flaw requiring correction. It means trusting that the right people, the right environments, and the right conversations exist for someone like you, even when the evidence around you has not yet shown that clearly. That is an extraordinarily difficult thing to believe, and it is one they rarely say they are still trying to learn. I give my best to everyone else, and I am not sure anyone has ever truly done that for me. There is one more unspoken thought worth sitting with, and it may be the most quietly painful of all. Highly intelligent, emotionally deep people tend to be extraordinary at holding space for others. They listen beneath the words. They notice what is not being said. They sense when someone is struggling before that person has even found language for it. They give generously, thoughtfully, and with a level of attentiveness that most people around them have never experienced from anyone else. And the thought they almost never speak aloud is this: I am not sure anyone has ever truly shown up for me the way I show up for them. Research in attachment theory and interpersonal psychology suggests that individuals with high emotional intelligence and deep relational attunement often find themselves in a quietly exhausting pattern. Because they are so capable of giving, people rarely think to ask what they need. Because they appear so composed and self-sufficient, their vulnerability gets overlooked. Because they are so skilled at making others feel seen, no one pauses to ask whether they themselves feel seen. This is what some researchers refer to as the caregiver's invisibility wound, the slow, quiet ache that develops when someone spends years being deeply present for others without ever experiencing that same quality of presence directed back toward them. It does not make them bitter. It makes them tired in a way that sleep does not fix. So they continue. They continue listening, giving, noticing, and holding space. Because that is who they are. Not a role they chose, but a nature they were born into. And somewhere underneath all of that generous presence is a thought that rarely surfaces into words. I would love, just once, for someone to see me as clearly as I see them. So what does all of this tell us? It tells us that intelligence, at its most honest and human level, is not simply about how quickly a mind processes information. It is about how deeply a person feels the weight of what they understand. The thoughts that highly intelligent, deeply sensitive people carry quietly inside. I already knew this would hurt, and I stayed anyway. I have spent my whole life being too much for rooms that were simply too small. I give everything to others and wonder if anyone will ever do the same for me. These are not signs of weakness or wounds that need fixing. They are signs of a mind and heart working at a depth the world is still learning to appreciate. And understanding that depth, in yourself and in others, is perhaps the most quietly powerful thing you can do.